Isaac Newton did not read the Emerald Tablet as a vague spiritual slogan. In his surviving notes, matter must rise because it has to become subtle, mobile, and capable of receiving new forces. But it must also descend because those forces are useless until they become fixed in matter. The ascent changes what the substance can receive. The descent changes what it can hold. That is why, in Newton's reading of the Emerald Tablet, the work cannot end above. Transformation becomes complete only when what has risen returns to Earth in a new condition. This interpretation survives in a manuscript now known as Kane's MS-28. Newton did more than copy a famous Hermetic text. He produced an English translation, preserved a Latin version, and placed beside them a detailed commentary on the operations hidden inside its compressed language. That matters because the Emerald Tablet is extraordinarily brief. It speaks of one thing, of the superior and the inferior, of the sun and moon, of separating the subtle from the gross, and of a substance that ascends from earth to heaven before descending again. These lines can sound like cosmology, symbolism, or mystical poetry. Newton read them as instructions for understanding matter, not necessarily as a complete laboratory recipe. The manuscript does not give us a simple experiment labeled Emerald Tablet, but his commentary repeatedly converts its images into alchemical relations: fixed and volatile, sulphur and mercury, separation and recombination, sublimation and fixation. The first key is the relation between what is above and what is below. Today, that formula is often treated as a general statement that everything reflects everything else. In Newton's commentary, it becomes more specific. The superior and the inferior correspond to two conditions within the work: the volatile and the fixed. The volatile rises. It is mobile, subtle, penetrating, and difficult to retain. The fixed remains. It is dense, stable, resistant, and capable of holding a form. These qualities appear opposed, but Newton does not treat them as two realities that must remain separate. He connects them with sulphur and mercury, two central alchemical principles. In this framework, sulphur is not simply the yellow chemical substance found in nature, and mercury is not merely the liquid metal in a vessel. They describe active principles and conditions of matter. Newton presents them as closely related. Sulphur can be understood as mercury brought to maturity, while mercury is sulphur in a less mature or less fixed condition. They are different, but their difference is partly one of degree, digestion, and development. This changes the meaning of opposition. Fixed and volatile are not enemies. They are incomplete conditions of the same operation. The volatile can move and penetrate, but cannot easily remain. The fixed can remain, but cannot easily move or enter another body. If the alchemist preserves only one side, the operation fails. The work requires a substance capable of carrying both powers at once. Newton therefore reads the Emerald Tablet as a problem of union. How can matter acquire the penetrating force of the volatile without losing the stability of the fixed? The answer begins with the tablet's one thing. In Newton's commentary, this unity becomes a kind of chaos, a confused material condition from which distinct elements and properties must be drawn. Chaos here does not mean random disorder in the modern sense. It means a matter in which the parts of the work are present, but not yet separated, purified, or correctly arranged. This gives the creation language of the Emerald Tablet an operative function. The formation of the world begins from an undivided condition. Distinctions emerge, elements separate. What was confused receives order. The alchemist attempts something analogous within a limited material body. The point is not that a vessel literally contains the entire universe. The point is that the same pattern can organize both accounts: unity, separation, ordering, and recombination. Older Hermetic cosmology often describes creation through this movement. Darkness and a troubled, humid nature appear before light, fire, air, earth, and water become distinguishable. Form does not emerge by leaving matter untouched. It emerges because the confused condition is divided and ordered. For Newton, this made cosmogony useful to alchemy. Creation could be read as a model of operation. The alchemist begins with a material chaos, separates what is hidden inside it, and then attempts to reunite those parts in a more complete form. The emerald tablet condenses this entire pattern into a sequence of images. But separation alone is not enough. Newton's commentary insists that the subtle must be separated from the gross, carefully and gradually. A violent division may destroy the relation the work is supposed to transform. The matter must first be purified. Its different conditions must become recognizable. Heat then allows the subtle part to rise through sublimation. Sublimation is more than evaporation. Within alchemical language, it is the elevation and refinement of a substance. What was bound in a dense body becomes mobile. It travels upward through the vessel, reaches a different condition, and can then condense or return. This is the rise shown in the emerald tablet. But Newton does not stop there. The matter descends again. And this descent is not a reversal of the work. It is the second half of the work. When the substance rises, it is loosened from its gross condition. It becomes subtle enough to circulate and receive what the alchemical system describes as superior forces. When it descends, those acquired qualities are returned to the lower material body. The process can then be repeated. Rise, return, rise again. With each circulation, the distinction between fixed and volatile is worked differently. The fixed part is open to movement. The volatile part is taught to remain. The substance gradually gains both the penetrating capacity associated with spirit and the stable resistance associated with body. This is why matter must rise and fall. If it only rises, it escapes fixation. It may become refined, but it remains unstable, dispersed, or incomplete. If it only remains below, it never acquires the subtle power required to penetrate and transform. The operation needs motion in both directions. The upper must enter the lower. The lower must become capable of receiving the upper. Their correspondence becomes effective only through circulation. This also explains one of the tablet's most easily misunderstood claims, that the power of the substance becomes complete when it is turned toward earth. At first, that sounds contradictory. Why should a substance ascend toward heaven, only to be brought back down? Why should refinement end in earth, rather than in permanent elevation? Because in alchemy, a force that cannot be fixed cannot complete the transformation. The return to earth gives the volatile a body. It gives the subtle a stable place from which to act. The result is no longer merely something that rises, nor something that remains inert below. It is a compound condition capable of penetrating like a spirit and enduring like a body. This is fixation. Fixation does not simply mean making something physically hard. It means stabilizing a quality that was previously temporary or fugitive. The transformed matter must retain what the circulation has given it. The result must hold. In this sense, the emerald tablet gave Newton a compact map of the great work. One thing becomes differentiated. The subtle is separated from the gross. The volatile rises. It receives, circulates, and returns. What was mobile becomes fixed without losing its penetrating capacity. Creation becomes operation. This helps explain why Newton devoted serious attention to such a short text. He was not merely collecting strange sayings attributed to Hermes Trismegistus. He was testing how each statement could correspond to an alchemical mechanism. What exactly is the one thing? What does the sun generate? What does the moon receive? Which part rises? What must return? How can opposite qualities be brought into one body? Those are questions about the structure and behavior of matter within the alchemical system. They also complicate the familiar image of Newton. It is tempting to divide him into two separate figures: the rational philosopher of nature presented to the public, and the private alchemist working in secrecy. But that division imposes modern boundaries on a period that did not organize knowledge in exactly the same way. What was then called chemistry could include metallurgy, medicine, laboratory procedures, the analysis of substances, and the possibility of transmutation. Newton's alchemical manuscripts belong to his wider attempt to understand how matter acts, changes, combines, separates, and acquires new properties. This does not mean that the Emerald Tablet secretly produced his work on gravity or optics. The surviving manuscript does not support that claim. It also does not prove that the tablet governed every part of his alchemical study. We cannot point to one experiment and say with certainty that Newton performed it as a direct application of these lines. Even the exact status of the commentary requires caution. Some parts may preserve ideas gathered from earlier alchemical authors, reorganized and interpreted through Newton's own reading. But the central fact remains clear. Newton copied the Emerald Tablet, translated it, and surrounded it with an explanation of real alchemical concepts. For him, its language could be unfolded into a system of matter, chaos, elements, sulphur, mercury, fixed, volatile, sublimation, descent, and fixation. There is also an important boundary between this documented Newton and the legends surrounding the tablet itself. Later occult traditions described an actual emerald or smaragdine table discovered in the tomb, crypt, or hidden valley of Hermes. They connected it with a primordial secret, a quintessence, and a substance capable of receiving both celestial and terrestrial virtues. These stories shaped the reception of the Emerald Tablet, but they do not prove that Newton believed he was handling the words of a physical artifact recovered from antiquity. He worked from transmitted texts, copies, translations, compilations, and commentaries. The Emerald Tablet is also not simply a missing chapter of the Corpus Hermeticum. The texts have distinct histories of transmission, even when they share broad Hermetic patterns such as unity, correspondence, cosmic order, and the movement between higher and lower levels. Keeping those distinctions clear does not weaken Newton's reading. It makes it more interesting. He did not need the legend to be historically literal for the text to function as an alchemical instrument. Its value lay in the relations it allowed him to examine. One substance and many forms. Sulphur and mercury, fixed and volatile, earth and heaven, ascent and descent. Newton's commentary turns those pairs into stages of one operation. Matter rises because it must be loosened, refined, and made capable of receiving. Matter falls because what it receives must be embodied, stabilized, and made operative below. The rise gives it reach. The return gives it permanence. And fixation joins the two. That is why matter must rise and fall in Isaac Newton's reading of the Emerald Tablet. The goal was never to escape the material world and remain above it. The goal was to return with a force that matter could finally hold. For Newton, the Emerald Tablet turned creation into operation. Matter rises to acquire power, returns to preserve it, and becomes complete only when the volatile and the fixed can act together. Subscribe for more clear explorations of alchemy, Hermeticism, and the figures who shape them.